all so complicated. Let us go over all the main facts quietly and methodically. Recount them to me, Hastings, in an orderly and lucid fashion. I started forthwith, endeavoring to be as orderly and lucid as I could. We start, I said, with Mr. Paynter, a man of 55, rich, cultured, and somewhat of a globetrotter. For the last 12 years, he has been little in England, but suddenly tiring of incessant traveling, he bought a small place in Worcestershire, near Market Handford, and prepared to settle down. His first action was to write to his only relative, a nephew, Gerald Paynter, the son of his younger brother, and to suggest to him that he should come and make his home at Croflands, as the place is called, with his uncle. Gerald Paynter, who is an impecunious young artist, was glad enough to fall in with the arrangement, and had been living with his uncle for about 7 months when the tragedy occurred. Your narrative style is masterly, murmured Perrault. I say to myself, it is a book that talks, not my friend Hastings. Paying no attention to Perrault, I went on, warming to the story. Mr. Paynter kept up a fair staff at Croflands, 6 servants, as well as his own Chinese body servant, Ah Ling. His Chinese servant, Ah Ling, murmured Perrault. On Tuesday last, Mr. Paynter complained of feeling unwell after dinner, and one of the servants was dispatched to fetch the doctor. Mr. Paynter received the doctor in his study, having refused to go to bed. What passed between them was not then known, but before Dr. Quentin left, he asked to see the housekeeper, and mentioned that he had given Mr. Paynter a hypodermic injection, as his heart was in a very weak state, recommended that he should not be disturbed, and then proceeded to ask some rather curious questions about the servants, how long they had been there, from whom they had come, etc. The housekeeper answered these questions as best she could, but was rather puzzled as to their purport. A terrible discovery was made on the following morning. One of the housemaids, on descending, was met by a sickening odor of burned flesh, which seemed to come from her master's study. She tried the door, but it was locked on the inside. With the assistance of Gerald Paynter and the Chinaman, that was soon broken in, but a terrible sight greeted them. Mr. Paynter had fallen forward into the gas fire, and his face and head were charred beyond recognition. Of course, at the moment, no suspicion was aroused as to its being anything but a ghastly accident. If blame was attached to anyone, it was to Dr. Quentin for giving his patient a narcotic and leaving him in such a dangerous position. And then a rather curious discovery was made. There was a newspaper on the floor, lying where it had slipped from the old man's knees. On turning it over, words were found to be scrawled across it, feebly traced in ink. A writing table stood close to the chair in which Mr. Paynter had been sitting, and the forefinger of the victim's right hand was ink-stained up to the second joint. It was clear that, too weak to hold a pen, Mr. Paynter had dipped his finger in the inkpot and managed to scrawl these 2 words across the surface of the newspaper he held. But the words themselves seemed utterly fantastic. Yellow Jasmine, just that, and nothing more. Croflands had a large quantity of yellow jasmine growing up its walls, and it was thought that this dying message had some reference to them, showing that the poor old man's mind was wandering. Of course, the newspapers, agog for anything out of the common, took up the story rather disappointed. And then Perrault's eyes twinkled a little. And then I say to myself, since there is here something that I do not understand, it would be well that I should investigate the matter. I must not permit myself to be wholly engrossed by the Big Four. Ah, we are just arriving. My little clothes brush, where does it hide itself? Here it is. Brush me down, I pray you, my friend, and then I will perform the same service for you. Yes, said Perrault thoughtfully, as he put away the brush. One must not permit oneself to be obsessed by one idea. I have been in danger of that. Figure to yourself, my friend, that even here, in this case, I am in danger of it. Those two lines you mentioned, a downstroke and a line at right angles to it, what are they but the beginning of a four? Good gracious, Perrault, I cried, laughing. Is it not absurd? I see the hand of the Big Four everywhere. It is well to employ one's wits in a totally